Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show on today on Voice America Media. I'm delighted that I've got a fantastic guest today. He's come back for a second time. Only the good ones come back for the second time. Sorry for anyone who's only been on once. But Paul is an amazing guy, and we're going to talk about his latest book, Winning the Snakes and Ladders Game of Life. Before I do that, I want to say a big thank you to Robin Dreek, who was on the show last week. And Robin was a former FBI investigator and used to recruit spies. He was also ex-Marine Corps, and he talked to us really in a way around. There was a lot of storytelling around the World Trade Center. He was there when the Trade Center came down. He did a lot of investigation into that, but he talked about people, and he talked about feedback and things like that. But there were lots of gems and insights from a very, very wise and smart man. I think one of the things that he made me feel a little bit better about in terms of what's going on in the world right now was, as a historian, he was actually saying that on the whole, it's still far safer to be a human being right now than it's been, for most times during history, which is hard to appreciate when we see what's going on in the news. But we do have access to news in a way that we never had previously in the past. So the show is very much about bringing to you people who are doing great work, people that we can be inspired by, and can really help us to do good and to elevate ourselves and contribute more to this world. Rather than being, a problem within it, to really make a difference. And my guest today, Paul Davis, is someone who certainly does that. He's from Ireland. He's a multiple author. He's a really renowned in Ireland business growth consultant. He's a sought after speaker, and he talks about the unique genius within us, and really loves to empower professionals to find that and help them to lead their fields. He's the creator of the Genius Code for Personal Mastery. He's a 3 times best-selling author. He's often hailed as a lifesaver by his clients. He's got a really remarkable approach and has had multi-million euro success stories with clients, but he's also a man with great compassion, great spirit. He has had some challenging life experiences, which I think when you do, it sets you up for lots and lots of life experiences to be able to then share your wisdom when it all comes together as you get a little bit older in your career, as Paul and I are starting to do right now. We're about the same age. So we're going to talk about the highs and the setbacks. We're going to talk about resilience and purpose. We're going to draw on Paul's expertise in this fabulous new book, Winning the Snakes and Ladders Game of Life. So a big welcome to my guest today, to Paul Davis.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Chris. Thank you so much for everything.
You're very, very welcome. It's been a little, well, it's not been too long. Maybe it's been 18 months or something since our last interview. What's been going on in your world since we last spoke?
Yeah, it's actually been quite busy in some respects, but not a huge amount different or major going on. Business has been very, very busy, which is really, really good. With consulting clients and mentoring clients. I suppose what I've been working on is I wanted to republish my first 2 books, which I did, and then I published 2 new books. So Genius Unlocked was the next book, and then the book that you referenced there, Winning the Snakes and Ladders Game of Life, was just published in November last year. And I thought that was going to be it for writing books, but now I literally within a few short weeks, I found myself making notes for my next new book. So that's what I've been working on, literally just getting books out there, really.
So you're a serial author these days, by the sound of things.
It is, yeah.
I'm actually going to do something I never normally do. I'm just going to adjust a light in here, which is blinding me at the moment. So excuse me for a moment, but that's a little bit better, and I'm not being blinded, which is great. So you've this book, The Winning the Snakes and Ladders of Life. It's what was the first snake that truly changed how you saw life?
It's a hard one because I always felt different in growing up. and that was easy in some respects because I was born the seventh son of a seventh of a seventh. So in Ireland, there's a lot of folklore behind that. So I was kind of, in some respects, I was always treated differently. That's one way. But then I always found myself a bit like on the periphery of things, on the outside of everything. So whether it be family, like as if I was on the outside of family looking in, or when it came to friends or work colleagues or school, I always felt I was on the observer, the outside and looking in. So I'd go anywhere. I could be going to, a coffee shop, and I'd just find myself observing people and life, and just the life going past, as opposed to being in the actual grains of living as such, for want of a better word. But I do know, I do recognize one pivotal moment in my life, and I was in around 30 at the time, just coming up to my 30th birthday, and the CEO of the company I was working with at the time, I'd been working with her for about 12 months, and just things couldn't gel between the two of us. I was performing as finance director for the manufacturing company, and he was doing things that I just couldn't sign off. So there was a conflict of values there for in a lot of respects. And I remember distinctly going away on holiday with my family, and I remember getting up, but it was between 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I left my wife and the kids in the apartment that we were staying in, and I just went down to the beach, walked the beach, sat down on the beach, and I just got this, for one of the word, insight or download or whatever you want to call it, and it was around his behavior in some respects, but also life going forward. And I was 30 at that stage then, on holiday, and I just made the decision that I was actually going to take control of my own life. So that was a pivotal moment for me in that time. And funny enough, I actually, on the way back, at that stage then, it was into working hours back in Ireland, and because I was in Spain at the time. And I made a phone call back to say that I was given notice I was going to resign from my position, let's put it that way. And I didn't even tell my family at that stage. But anyway, I was given a notice from that side. But I also, when I came back, now this is going back a good number of years. So I'm 57 now, and so I was going back, 27 years. And when I came back to Ireland, so we didn't have, there's no such thing as the internet back those days. But I ordered the biggest order at the time of self-development books and self-development programs. And it was so large that the owner of the company hand delivered them to my home. And he said it was the biggest order that he actually ever received. And from there on, I was just on a path that I wanted to take control of my own life, and what could I learn from all the experts in the world of what they had done to perform at their best. And that was literally it. That's so I've always seen life very, very differently to most people, I think.
Yeah, because that was an unusual upbringing, wasn't it? With in Ireland with the 777, you found
Yeah,
yourself as being like a local healer as a young child,
that's
didn't
that's
you?
right. Yeah,
So
yeah.
interesting that you kind of observing life when actually people will have been observing you and revering you in some ways, I imagine.
Yeah, so I was kind of yeah, I was treated differently in the family, so you can read into that as you choose. Um, but yeah, so when you're talking with six other siblings, all brothers, you can imagine what was going on. As being, I was getting preferential treatment from one of the parents, my mum. So yeah, it was just a very unusual upbringing. Let's put it that way. But
Yeah.
but on the other respect, very typical, because we were middle class family, like nothing extraordinary out of our lives. But there was just this nuance that, no matter where I went, that this was always brought out as regards the healer side of me. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've known you for a little while, and I think when I think about you, you have this side of you which is just very wise, very insightful. You've got the accountancy and finance sort of background, so you're very kind of practical, financial, and but then also with this, the way that you were brought up, and I guess brought up in a in a religious environment in Ireland. You've got this very, very deep, insightful perspective about you, which is quite uncanny, really. I think you've given me advice before, and you've pinpointed where I need to focus, and it's resonated with me immediately on a heart level. So that's must be quite of interesting at what you've been through in that journey, but also have that other side to you,
Yeah,
with work that's often seen as very financial, black and white,
yeah.
growth and all that kind of thing.
It's interesting. It's unusual, but it is interesting. So yeah, it's been a constant battle throughout my whole life in terms of, yeah, I'm very logical, very systemized, very process driven on one side, but then there's completely other side, which is the intuitive, the insightful side of things. So it's kind of marrying both sides, but it's actually been a massive, massive, massive advantage, to
Yeah.
be quite honest, because I'd get the insights and the knowings for people, and I'd see things and I'd get information in different ways. But I'd constantly try and prove it in some shape or form. So when I was writing this book in particular, and all the different methodologies that I've developed over the years, I was always trying to prove it with a system or with a process that nobody could kind of question, for one of a better word, that it wasn't just airy fairy or woo woo in some respects. It was very grounded in terms of what an individual could do. And no matter who I speak to, and I go through any of the concepts that I'm working with clients on, they just get it, like they immediately get it, because it makes complete sense and it resonates with them on a deeper level as well. But I use a lot of metaphors as well, because then the metaphors kind of help people to remember different things. And it's funny because I actually just received an email from somebody literally just about a half an hour or so ago, and because I put an article out on LinkedIn, and he just sent me an email and said, "Look, I remember you talking about watering holes and birdseed back about 10 years ago, and he can still remember to this day the meaning and the understanding of watering holes and birdseed." And that's what I do. I try and bring it into a metaphor or something that's easy for people to understand and remember, with a very, very logical support to it. Let's put a foundation to it.
So you're going to have to explain watering holes and birdseed now.
Yeah. Okay. So Um, but when I'm explaining to clients, because clients try and say, okay, so where do I go to get clients? Where do I go to get business? And a lot of people will go to networking meetings and groups and all that kind of things. But what you find in networking meetings is that everybody's there as a seller. They're not there to buy typically. Whereas if you identify your niche, what you're doing is there's always a watering hole for a niche. And what I mean by that is, so if you think of nature, and I'll apply a lot of things to nature, um, the animals will always congregate at the watering hole. So they'll travel miles, they'll travel distances, but they'll always congregate at the watering hole. And the watering hole doesn't have to do anything, doesn't have to advertise, market itself, or put placards up in regards where it is and what it's doing and so on. It just literally be water in a watering hole. So I use that concept for people to think about, okay, so where is it that your target clients, your potential clients, your ideal clients naturally congregate?
Yeah.
So they'll have an association, or they'll have a membership body or something along those lines. They'll have an association magazine, for example, or they might have a particular podcast that they listen to. So that's one thing. And on the other side, I noticed where little kids in a park, when they see birds on the ground, their natural instinct is to chase the birds because they want to catch them. But invariably, what the birds do is they fly away. Now, what we do as adults and humans is that we chase after our clients. But actually, if you change the dynamic from chasing clients as opposed to attracting clients, it's a very, very different relationship and a very, very different dynamic. So what typically the wise old person does on the park bench is he or she just throws birdseed on the ground, and then all the birds come to them. So what I do is I use that analogy then to say, okay, so what's the birdseed that we can create for an individual business to have particular types of clients and ideal clients come to the actual business. So now you've got that relationship where the clients are coming to you as opposed to having to chase the clients. So once you think in watering holes and birdseed terms, you'll things become so simple from there. And now it's about the clients. It's not about this is what we do, because that's typically what business owners and typically service professionals. But it's more about what is it that the client wants. Yeah.
Now, having read the book, one of the things that I admire about you greatly, and you're very, very open and very transparent about in the book,
Mm,
is something which is so important, I think, today. A lot of people are worried about suicide amongst particularly young people.
yeah,
Suicide rates are very high. Mental health, and we've been through the pandemic. We have social media. We have all sorts of things going on that can unsettle young people. AI now, and risk
yeah,
of job loss, and those sorts. A lot going on. So mental health is really, really important. And you're very open about your mental health and the journey that you've been through yourself, and it might just be good just to touch on that, because I think you've written a book here, The Snakes and Ladders of Life, but you've truly experienced some of those snakes and ladders, and
yeah,
people will look at you and they see a very successful consultant and family man, and they'll I know you've talked before with us about your experiences flying and all sorts of things. So you have led an exciting life, but actually deep down you've been through some challenges. You've had to dig deep, haven't you? So maybe just share a little bit about that, because it's
yeah.
important context, I think, because for anybody who's reading this book, is if they felt anything like that or had mental health challenges, felt had
Yeah.
low points, when things have happened. I think your unique insight is a very, very helpful foundation for growth, really, and learning.
Yeah, I suppose for me, it went back to a very, very young age. So age 10 is when I first had well, age 10 is the earliest I can remember, let's put it away, that I first had the thoughts of, look, I just didn't want to be here. I literally just did not want to be in this life. And I did attempt, obviously failed, but I just continued on. And I talk in the book in relation to, I asked my brother for help, and he told me to F off, which is typically Irish language. And I made a decision that, okay, I wasn't going to ask anybody else for help at that point.
Right.
So continued on, and but all throughout school, going to college later on and part time, as in I worked during the day and went to college at night time. So all through college, through school, through my early career and all the kinds of things, I constantly would have this feeling of I just didn't want to be here. And I wanted to check out of this life. I wanted to find a way of how I could get out of this life. I'd plan things, I'd try different things and so on. All of them failed. So some people may say, well, I'm useless at some things. But I'm actually quite open about it because I didn't reveal to anybody at all the thoughts that I had inside. And it wasn't until 2011, 2012, when my first brother passed away, and he passed away when he was 56. And it was very, very sudden. And it came to a point whereby literally I had to say it to somebody. So I told my wife, so she hadn't got a clue at all prior to that. Um, but I wanted, so between the book and everybody that I'm talking to, one thing that I found, and one of the reasons why I didn't share anything with anybody else, was because A, it's hugely risky. If you're a business owner and you're working with clients and you're in a position within your community and all that kind of things, it's a huge, huge risk to reveal to somebody else your thoughts, because immediately they treat you differently. So I'm an intuitive and an empath, so I would pick up on people's feelings and all that kind of sort of things. So therefore, I wouldn't tell anybody. And so one of the reasons is, yeah, it was a huge risk. Um, but equally, as soon as, and the reason why I want to kind of talk quite openly about it is that I've nothing to hide. At this stage, I have literally nothing to hide
Mm.
whatsoever. And I want people to feel comfortable in the fact that they can ask me any question that they want around anything in life, whether it be depression or suicide ideation or business development for anything really. I don't hold anything back. And what I found was that it just makes it real for people. And I wanted to be real in the book. I wanted to be real in the conversations that I have with people, rather than trying to be to skirt around things and just to pretend going forward. Now I no longer have to pretend. It's great from that perspective. It's a huge relief. But also, I wanted to explain to people that had never had suicide ideation before, had never had depression before, because I would regularly come across people that they literally just can't fathom it. And they'd say it and say, like, I just can't understand how somebody could take their own life. And that's typically the sentence that they come out with. And I get that. So they don't understand somebody being in that position. So therefore, I wanted to kind of maybe throw a bit of light on the subject and say, well, yeah, this is what it's like. So you can have somebody that's highly functioning, hugely successful, because I have clients in this bracket. They have everything. They have the houses. They were probably on their second wife, if not the third wife at that stage. They have the houses, they have the cars, they have the holidays, they have the investments, they have everything. So externally, they look hugely successful. But internally, when they're allowed and they allow themselves to literally just have an open conversation with me, and because they know my background, they know where I've come from and all that kinds of things, through the different books that I've written and all that kinds of things, they know they can have an open, honest conversation. And now you see a very, very different person. And now it's about giving the person the tools and the skills to not so much build themselves back up, but there's an element of that, but to just to handle the things that show up in their life. So it's kind of to, and one of the feedbacks that I've gotten so far on the book is from people that you wouldn't think, other people wouldn't have thought of it, that they had suicide ideation thoughts. They were reading the book and they say, yeah, that's me. That's exactly me. That's exactly how I feel. That's exactly the thoughts that I have. So it's connected with them and allow them to have a forum or space to say, yeah, you get me, you see me. Because yeah, you can. I've been to therapists over the years. So I've tried all different types of therapy and all that kinds of things. And when you're sitting across the room from somebody that just hasn't, and you know it, and again from being intuitive and you kind of know that they haven't experienced it, um, but you just know that they just don't get it, and therefore there's an immediate disconnect between the therapist and me as the client, because they don't get it. They're just kind of going through a process and so on. So you know there's no real kind of benefit to going through the therapy from that perspective. And that's hence the reason why I was doing my own research, trying to find out everything that I could possibly find out. And I did. I've put everything in the book that I found, and a very, very different understanding of depression and what leads to suicide ideation and so on. Again, just to give people the tools and the skills to be able to handle it and be able to deal with it. Right now at the moment, I absolutely love life. I absolutely love life. I see life as being absolutely amazing. It's so perfect in how it works, and it's just phenomenal. And I observe from again from a completely different angle. But it's just amazing to be true. And it's part of the book for me because again, there's three letters at the end of the book, and that was a download that I received. And for me, it was around encouraging people just to get through the phase, to give them the tools to get through the phase and create the life that they want to have. And when they do that, now they can get to the other side and say, "Oh my God, this is absolutely amazing," and really enjoy because it's a part that they have to go through in order to. Bottom line is just develop the skills to handle those kind of side of things that show up in life that trigger us and sets us back, which are the stakes. And once we know how to handle a snake, now we can move forward on the board game. And that's literally what I put into the book.
And so we're going to, after the break, we'll look at the tools. But just in the few minutes we've got left, there might be people here who know somebody who's got depression or has suicidal thoughts. They might be feeling some of those themselves. How do you what would you say to them to help them maybe understand that in some way? With all your experience and the people that you work with, and then there's people obviously who you say just don't get it at all. How would you articulate this in a way that people can really understand it and rationalize
Yeah,
it?
for the people that are experiencing it, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing broken. There's nothing to be fixed. That's absolutely go off. Um, Depression and suicide ideation is feedback, and every single emotion that we have in life is feedback. So when we look at it from through that lens and through that perspective, now it's a case, okay, so what's the feedback or what is it trying to tell me? And it can be a few different things that it leads to. One is that we're not, one as an example, we're living in a life that we're not really want to be living. We want to be living in a different way or doing something differently in our life. That's an inner desire that we want to have. Other things that we're getting triggered, whether it be a financial trigger or a relationship trigger or so on, it's it's identifying the triggers that a person is experiencing. And then once you know how to dissolve the triggers, which again I put in the book, so there's no problems with that. But once you know how to dissolve the triggers, now you're begin to develop the tools to handle those snakes. So for anybody going through that, it's you look at it as being it's feedback for something that needs to be addressed. And once you address it, now you don't have to constantly keep coming back to it. It eliminates itself from that perspective. Yeah.
I see. So it's actually it is it's not addressing certain things that lead to those feelings and emotions. You also mentioned in the book actually about DNA, that some things can get
Yeah.
transferred
Yeah.
across in DNA.
Yeah.
So
It can
that's
do.
quite
Yeah. Yeah.
so can could this be something that some people have a natural affinity to because it's in their
Some
coding?
do. Yeah, some do because it's honestly because when you think about it, and again, if you do the research, you'll find it's easier for people. And what I mean by that is it's easier to sit on the couch. It's easier to stay in bed. So, and I use a term, motivation follows action. So when you take an action, now the motivation starts to increase, as opposed to when you're sitting on the couch, try and motivate yourself to go to the gym. It's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah.
So once you take an action, well, now your motivation increases. So as a human body or as a human being, it's natural and easier for somebody just to sit on the couch or stay in bed. So, but what they're doing is they're ruminating about the story that they've created in their mind, without actually dealing with the story or dealing with what the story is trying to tell them. And once you deal with the story and what it's trying to tell you, now you move forward onto a completely different level altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So we're going to talk about in this second half of this, and there's what I sense from you at age of 30, you rapidly absorbed yourself in self development, and you've done a lot of work on yourself and over the years, and so what you've been able to do is create and be clear on the tools and methodologies that can be adopted to help overcome this and get people back
Yeah.
on the trajectory of living the life that they really want to lead.
Yeah. And it's I tested so many different things. So I tested what works and what doesn't work for me and for others. So my clients were, for one better word, a test bed for what I was
Yeah.
trying as well. So yeah. So everything I teach now it's literally it's what I found to work, as opposed to what is common knowledge out there. So there are different concepts, different things that people wouldn't have come across before. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, on that note, we're going to go to commercial break, and then in the second half, I would recommend if you're just sitting there listening to this, it's always good to have a piece of paper or whatever or your phone or whatever, just to record maybe 2 or 3 points that you can then take away and do something with. So we would love you to use this and this time with Paul to actually make a difference to your life or someone else's life. So there'll be there's a lot of information and thoughts and ideas in Paul's book and his work, and we'll cover some of those in the second half of this conversation. So we're back with you again in just a couple of minutes. Do join us after the break. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Paul Davis, and we're talking about his important new book, "Winning the Snakes and Ladders of Life." And just at this point in time, where so many people across the globe are feeling unsettled, I think it's important to have wise people that you can learn from, read, and absorb some of their thoughts and ideas to help you through this journey. Because at the end of the day, we all deserve to thrive. So, Paul, let's talk about, in the book, one of the things you talk about is a lot is triggers. And it triggers that, what triggers these feelings, these emotions, this unbalance. Share, please.
Yeah. So there are so many people that will be triggered by different things. So let me explain a trigger. A trigger is an event that happens or circumstance that happens that somebody will have a perceived negative response to. So an easy example of that for because it's quite common across a lot of people is financial triggers. So if something is threatened to the income, or for example, if they're being made redundant or let go of their job, it would trigger a negative cycle within them. So typically, some people will say, "Oh my God, this is going to be the worst thing in my life. I've lost my job. Where am I going to get the money from? How am I going to pay the mortgage? What am I going to say to the family? What am I going to say to friends? What am I going to say to the community? And how do I come back from this?" and so on. So they go into a spiral. But the initial trigger was literally that it was a threat to their financial position. Now, there's a mixture of, their identity built in with that as well, because now they're looking at, okay, how do people perceive them, having been made redundant or let go? And right now in the world, that's happening quite a lot, between redundancies and downsizing and all kinds of things. So something will set off a trigger. But fundamentally within those triggers and that response that we have to a trigger, it means we're attached to something associated with either finances or identity or a relationship or our ego or our personality. We're attached to something. And feedback in that trigger is actually, if we were to step back, because let me show you the contrast. The contrast for other people, say, in that exact same situation can be, "Oh my God, now I can do what I want to do." So now I can pursue the business or the career that I want to choose.
Yeah.
Or now I have so much more free time, or I can now write that book, or I can take time off. So people react to it or respond to it in very different ways. But if you look at if you're being triggered by it, if you look at what the trigger is trying to give you the feedback of, typically it's an attachment. So if you take finances again, we can become attached to the finances. We can become attached to money. And unconsciously, we're actually being guided towards not becoming attached. So the more non-attached we become, the less we will be triggered. So we would try and hold on to people, for example, in a relationship, if people are going through a separation or a divorce or a relationship, to do with siblings, or when it's to do with, for example, empty nest scenarios and so on, where you're trying to hold on to the person because you fear the loss of that person in your life. But now you're attached to that person. So what is it underlying within that relationship or within that attachment that you're actually attached to? Now, when you start to break those down into its minutiae, now you can find, oh, so this is where this trigger was either developed, because we'll typically go back to a childhood scenario or childhood experience that you've seen. And that's what's called, or that's what created the trigger in the first place. So you don't want that relationship to go away. You don't want your finances to go away. You don't want your identity to go away. But the more you make yourself non-attached to each of those triggers, now they're not going to trigger in going forward. So understand triggers in a lot of different ways, and there's so many different ways of how we can look at triggers, because it's our beliefs, it's the traits that we see in other people, and what's that again, what that's reflecting back to ourselves. But once we identify them is one of the key things. And when you identify them, now you're not playing the story in your mind. You're not building castles in your mind from the perspective of, oh, the person doesn't like me, or I've lost my job, I'm no good anymore. No, it's nothing to do with that whatsoever. It's what's the trigger? And then when you identify the trigger, dissolve it. Now it's not a trigger going forward. And now that's where you're you're able to thrive in your life. You're able to have joy in your life because now you're not being triggered anymore.
Yeah.
You go through life, not that you're not that you're passive, but you're actually really really living life in a very very different way. You're engaged with it, but you're basically taking as much joy out of life as you possibly can, because again you're seeing it from a completely different perspective.
Yeah. Yes. So it's how we react to situations. So do we sort of check in if we're feeling angry or frustrated or
Yeah,
sad or guilty, or do we is it that the point where
yeah,
we check in and think, well, actually something's triggered that. What's triggered it? And
exactly.
is it
Yeah,
rational or not?
yeah. So when you observe, if you're able to catch yourself having a perceived negative response to something, and you catch yourself, it's a trigger. So now identify the trigger. So, for example, and again, triggers show up in so many different ways. Say, for example, we come across an individual and they are displaying a particular trait, and let's just say that they're seen as being stubborn. Let's just as just one example, and you're reacting or you respond to this person, and it's frustrating you and it's annoying you because you're seeing this person as being stubborn, and they're not moving their way. They're not doing what you want them to do, and this, that, and the other, and so on. So you'll see this with kids, with your partners, with in your marriages, relationships, in work, and all that. You'll see it everywhere. Um, but what it's actually showed you, its feedback, is that there's a trait within that individual that you're not recognizing within yourself. Now, when you recognize that trait within yourself, and always, always, always I'll get from people and clients, yeah, but I'm not stubborn. I don't do that. But for every way we break it down, we actually find out in their life where they are actually stubborn. Um, Believe it or not, there's 4,628 traits. Every single individual has all 4,628 traits. But most people will ignore the traits that they see in other people that they don't like. So therefore they don't own them, they don't see them within themselves. And therefore what's actually happening then is they're judging that other person. And as soon as you start to judge somebody else, you're also going to be judging yourself. And now you're reducing your self-worth. And by reducing your self-worth, you're reducing your confidence, and the ripple effect and knock-on effect is huge. But it's a very, very simple thing that you go through, and once you realize it, now, so it could be anything. Triggers always show up in everybody's lives every single day until such times they actually neutralize and dissolve the triggers.
Yeah. Yes. Fascinating. You've got me thinking about a friend of mine a few years ago who'd always had a very, very steady job. So we were thinking as a family, should we have a little holiday with them? And he came to me and he said, Chris, I've been thinking about this. I'm just not sure I can commit to a holiday because I've just discovered that in a couple of years' time I might not have a job. And I said, really? He said, yeah. I said, yeah. I said, how do you feel about it? He said, I feel really, really concerned and worried about it. And said, well, I'm sorry, but to hear that, but it's great news. You've got so long to plan. And just to let you know, for the last 15 years, I've never known if I've had work beyond 3 months as a consultant, rarely.
Yeah,
But I'm not sure
yeah,
that
yeah.
was helpful. But I'm just sort of thinking out of that. Was that me thinking about my own stability? Was that probably could have been a message coming out of that? But maybe I also helped him with the paradigm shift potentially.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
It was interesting.
Yeah,
So you utilize the word thrive, don't you, to help
yeah,
people with this? Do you want to just share what thrive means?
yeah. I use it
And
as an
some
acronym,
steps.
because it starts off with first of all T's for triggers, to identify the triggers in the first place, which
Yep.
we've just spoken about. And then you're going into the history of the trigger, because you'll find there's always a history, and it typically will go back into your formative years. Some psychologists will say, okay, your formative years are from 0 to 7. I personally, I feel it goes a little bit beyond that, up to about 12. So between age 0 to 12 is where our beliefs will be formed, our values will be formed, all the triggers will be formed as well. So we'll that's typically where the vast majority will actually occur. But also triggers can be formed later in life, so it's not, it never exhausts. So, but once you know where the trigger came from, Now you're getting an insight as to, okay, so why you do certain things, the beliefs that you hold, the values that you hold, and the triggers that you hold, and so on. And then you go through how you remove them. So you remove the trigger. So they could be traits, it could be events, and so on. So you're removing the trigger itself to dissolve it. And then you move into what I refer to as having an inner purpose. Now, I approach, as you know, Chris, I approach purpose in a very, very different way. It's not what everybody talks about in terms of, what they perceive or identify purpose as. The previous book that I wrote, Genius Unlocked, was all about purpose. And how I show the difference between, pursuing your passions or pursuing your ikigai or any other form of what people perceive as being purpose. Your inner purpose is very, very deep, but it's unique to an individual. So once you align your life in line with your inner purpose, now everything becomes an awful lot more simple. And what I typically then do is I create the career or the business around that inner purpose for people. And then you move into vision, which is the V in Thrive. And you got to have a picture of where you want to get to, an image of where you want to end up. And that's just it's you got to have a destination, no matter what. You just have to have a destination. So whether that's the flag on the golf green, or whether it's the moon that you're shooting for, whatever that might be, you've got to have an end point of where you want to get to, and you're moving towards that end point. And then in the last chapter that I speak about is excelling in life. And so I start off the book with, okay, so what does it mean to thrive? And for some people, that means one thing. But actually, once you get past thriving, well, then, okay, so what does it mean to really excel in life? And then I go through, okay, so again, it's a different methodology that I've created. It's tied in with the Genius Code. And again, that was another intuitive download that I got one night. It's a dodecahedron, which dodecahedron is a platonic state. And the Greek philosophers refer to it as ether, which is that unknown force or unknown energy in the universe. So I go through everything that's associated with excelling life. So I talk about the universal laws, I talk about the dodecahedron, I break it down, it's a 12-sided shape, and I break it down into literally, it's for one of a word, it's a matrix of how you look at every single aspect in your life. And if you look at it, and I've had clients come back and different readers say that they actually took it as a scorecard, and now they're using it as a scorecard to improve each of the 12 areas or each of the 12 faces of the dodecahedron to improve and to be able to excel in their life. So it's been used in a few different ways already since the book when it went out, which is absolutely amazing and brilliant. So that's what I mean by getting to a point whereby you're moving up in life. So again, in the book, I identify 12 different states of being,
Yep.
to go from despair to hope to belief to knowing and then to excel and to mastery. So that's just some of them, but there's 12 altogether. And ultimately, and what you'll find if for people that are on a spiritual journey, for example, or a spiritual awakening, and they some of them will talk along the language of, well, I feel more awakened, or I feel that I want to move towards enlightenment. Abraham Maslow talked about self-actualization. And naturally, as human nature and human beings, we want to progress, we want to grow, we want to evolve from that perspective. But how do we do it? And really within Excel is I'm trying to give the tools of, well, this is how you do it. This is how you get to higher states of being, is how you get to self-actualization, it's how you get to where you want to get to. And that's in my mind that's thriving, because you're no longer reacting to life. You are an active participant in life. You're engaged with it fully, but it's I think I said this in the book. I can't remember now because again I've written so many books. I think I said in this book, but it's like putting that it's like putting a new pair of glasses on and that gives you 20/20 vision. And it's just you see life in a completely different way. You see the game as such that the universe is playing out. And it's just a phenomenal game, and it's supposed to be fun. And when you approach it from a game and you approach it from the whole purpose, like one of the main purposes is literally to have fun, just as you would with a board game. Now life is completely different. It takes on a completely different shape altogether,
Yeah.
and it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, and I like the way you talk about in the book about the different experiences that we go through during the journey of life. Some of those would have seen, we might perceive them as being negative.
Yeah.
I have a different perspective on this now because I know you learn more on these negatives. But actually, what you describe in the book is that these are moments of real learning, real insight, real wisdom that actually help you to become a better human being. Your life experiences, and you're very open about this. The feelings of suicide enable you, as challenging as they may have been, they now enable you to help people who are
To
going
do
through
the
the
work I
same,
do.
because you've been there.
Yeah.
And not only that,
Yeah.
now you have this life, and
Yeah.
you're feeling you're feeling fulfilled. You love it.
Yeah.
You've been through that journey.
Yeah.
So do we need to look at these lower points in our life with a different perspective?
Yeah. Everything
It's
is
almost as
in
a
our life for a
gift.
reason. Yeah. Everything in our life is for a reason, and it is a gift. And it may not feel like a gift at the time, believe me, but it is actually a gift. And it's when you look back and you separate the emotion from it, and you look at the story or what it's telling you or the pattern that it's telling you, you deem so much from what that event is actually trying to get you to do. And I've seen this, and I've had these conversations with clients whereby, when we look back over their life, they're able to see, say, for example, relationships that they've ended up going into pretty much the same relationship time and time and time again. So that, for example, that could be with a narcissist boss. So they go into one particular job and the boss there is a narcissist. So they leave that job, they move to another job and they end up with another narcissist. And they move that job into another job and they come up with another narcissist. It's so common. It's comical in some respects. Or you have somebody whereby they get married and they a few years later they separate from that particular partner, then they fall into another relationship and they find, oh my God, the person has pretty much the exact same traits as the previous relationship. And then they go into another relationship and the same thing happens again. So it's when you look back, you're able to see the patterns. Um, as Steve Jobs said, it's by looking back we can join the dots. And that's exactly it in terms of you see them as, I refer to them as breadcrumbs. You see them as breadcrumbs in your life, and they're all to give you feedback or information from your unconscious mind, because your unconscious mind is constantly trying to help you to fulfill your purpose, your mission in life, what is that you're here to do, and what's going to give you fulfillment, what's going to give you joy. It's constantly trying to do that. But sometimes we just are too much in our heads, in our conscious thinking, and we think we know better, but in fact we actually don't. And the more you connect with your heart and your intuitive side, you learn so much more, and it becomes an awful lot easier. And you follow what your unconscious is trying to give you, and now it's on an easier path. Let's put it that way.
And it's almost you describe in the book as well around sometimes you get little nudges. I think you call that bird seed. Is that
I
right?
call it the feather, the brick, and the
The
truck.
feather. Sorry, the feather, the brick. Yeah. So we talked about bird seed. Yeah, the feather,
Yeah,
the brick, and
yeah.
yeah. So sometimes it can be a
It's
light
just a gentle nudge.
and
Yeah,
nudge.
just as like the touch of a feather.
Yeah.
But if we don't listen to the feathers, well then we'll get hit by a brick. So the brick is a little bit more subtle, as you can imagine. And but in real life, what that shows up as is it could be an illness that we're set back with, but it
Hmm.
doesn't disability. I can't say the word, but it doesn't disable us completely. We're still able to continue and perform. Or it could be financial setback. We lose a big client, but we're able to overcome it. Or it could be relationship. It basically can touch. The unconscious is amazing. It's so perfect because it can touch each aspect of our life and what's important to us. But bricks we can recover from them, but they do knock us back in some respects. And again, if we don't listen to the bricks, the truck will come along. Absolutely, I've seen it so many times that the truck comes along, and that comes up in a separation or divorce, bankruptcy, business failure, health. We will have a health setback whereby it's life altering at that point. So it does absolutely have an impact. So again, it will touch on every single area of our life in order for us to actually listen to our unconscious and to do what our unconscious is trying to guide us to do. So we have a choice. We can just listen to the nudges, as in the feathers, and not have to have any bricks and trucks. And that's part of the work that I try and teach my clients to do, which is to become more in tune with their intuitive side, which is where we're going as a global nation anyway, is to be more in tune with ourselves, and less in our heads.
Yeah, yeah, good, good. So I think that's interesting. So do you think people are becoming more intuitive?
Yeah,
We look at what's going on globally right now, and
yeah.
people, we see.
Actually, I'm gonna correct that answer. I did say yes immediately, but actually, there's two things, and I explain this way. One is there's been a huge rise over the last years in terms of mindfulness and meditation,
Mm,
and it's one of the first keys to develop your intuition, which is meditation. So one of the first keys, because you're settling the conscious thinking perspective. However, on the other side, there's a part of the brain called the executive center. It's in the prefrontal cortex, which is just behind your forehead, and it's responsible for creativity, planning, innovation, objectivity, and it has a much more, um, think of it as being, it's a super highway for your intuitive side. Um, but what part that develops the executive center is handwriting. So what a lot of people now are doing, and kids especially, is they're on their smartphone or their iPads, or they're on a laptop or a desktop or whatever it be. Very few people actually do handwriting.
mm,
Whereas again, the number of teachers over the years that came out in relation to this was to do journaling in the morning. But if you do journaling with a pen on paper, now you're actually activating your executive center, and by activating your executive center, you're developing your intuition side. So it's two pronged. If you continue doing an element of handwriting, and meditation, now you're well on your way to developing your intuitive side.
excellent. Well, we've coming to the end of the interview, and it's been absolutely fascinating and really helpful. I love the simple way that you've articulated a lot of this. However, what I take away from this, Paul, is that however we might be feeling right now, whether it's, for some that might be as much as depression, you've had some difficult challenges, difficult issues, and the opportunity to learn about ourselves. And we also, as you share in the book, there are lots of techniques and tools to help us to get right back on the front foot again and live the life that we want to live. But actually, probably more wiser, because we've been through those experiences, which have made us smarter, made us more intuitive, made us better able to help and guide others. So thank you so much for sharing this. And if you want to find out more about Paul's work, davisbusinessconsultants.com. You find out information there, and I recommend obtaining a copy of Winning the Snakes and Ladders of Life. It is a book that should be on many people's bookshelves, and read. On next week's show, so Paul's actually and I are part of a community to call the Elevation Collective, where I think we are very intuitive people who've come together to work on helping contribute to a better world and amplifying good in the world. And next week, it leads quite beautifully on from this. We've got another member of that community, Dr. Laurie Layden. Laurie has worked for 10 years she's an expert in trauma. She worked for 10 years with people in Rwanda, with orphans. She's also worked with in schools where there have been shootings like Sandy Hook, but she's got a very lovely methodology and process to help us to really help remove, I guess, some of the damage from those things that have triggered us in the past. So I think it fits in quite beautifully. So do check in next week. Do join us to hear from Laurie. You'll enjoy that. She's an amazing woman, as is Paul. And once again, check out Paul's links at davisbusinessconsultants.com. If this resonates with you, get a hold of a copy of the book. Please share this with people as well. There's a lot of people need help right now and support, and this this sort of information, it could be really helpful as a gift to other people. So please do share. Any questions or comments, Chris at chriscooper.co.uk, or contact Paul. Go go and reflect on this and have a think about what might be triggering you. Have a think about whether some of this, where this has come from, how are you going to remove this? And there's lots of work around to help you with your inner purpose and your vision and to excel, but keep moving forward. We all deserve to have a great life and to make the contribution in this world that we were born to make. So take care, everybody.